Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast which we disassemble a film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe into 1-minute segments and then examine it in obsessive and occasionally hilarious detail. I'm Kyle Olson from the Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society podcast.
Hey, and I'm Rob Cabasco, and Kyle.
Yes, sir.
World's Fairs. If you had to go back to the history of like these sort of exhibitions where just all different groups come together, you probably would go to 1844 Paris in the French Industrial Exhibition. That's probably seen as maybe one of the first real ones. 1851, a few years later, there was the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of All Nations in London. That's a huge deal. Fast forward to the 30s and the 40s, there's the famous New York World's Fairs, and that continues up to 64. We talked about the 64 site of the New York World's Fair in the previous minute. And there's some landmarks that people I probably don't even realize that these World's Fairs, and there's all different kinds of them and stuff, and different organizations run them. It's not like the Olympics where just one group does it. There's a bunch of different ones. But the Seattle World's Fair of 1962, you know about it because you've seen the landmark. The Space Needle was built as a part of that. So that becomes sort of the emblem of the city of Seattle. 1982 was the World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. The name sort of, or what you think of as World's Fairs, changes. In 1988, it becomes the World Expo. It's in Brisbane. Things change, though. Here's what happens. These expos and these World's Fairs, they become these amazing places for all these worlds to come together and nations to talk about their technologies. And around the late 80s, early 90s, they become PR campaign centers for cities and nations with large entry fees. And it becomes a real big business. Are these things still going around? Yes, they are. Expo 2020, which should have been in Dubai in October of 2020, is not happening.
Why isn't it happening, Rob?
Well, there's a little thing going on in the world. Now, maybe if you're listening to this in a future time and you hear the stories about the great pandemic, coronavirus of 2020, this is still happening. They took the World's Fair. It's been rescheduled for next year. Are they changing the name? No, it's going to be
2020 looks better on the logo.
That's okay. We got shirts. We got to sell the shirts. Expo 2020 will be in 2021. These are interesting. They probably were at their height in the 60s, I would say, like in the 40s, the middle of the 20th century. But they're still a thing for different purposes. Why do I go into this whole history class about World's Fairs? It has a little something to do with this minute we're going to do.
Rob's deep dives here on minute 9 of Iron Man 2 from 2010, directed by Mr. Jon Favreau. And in the spirit of the World's Fair, we have also opened our borders and invited more people in, including Mr. Andy Nelson from the Next Real podcast.
I just have to say, it's Brisbane, Rob. It's
Brisbane.
What did I say?
Brisbane.
Yeah. Every Aussie went, you gosh,
sorry about that.
Brisbane.
Well, that's not even a good Australian accent. What's my problem?
I don't know. Can I just say, I thought the World Expo had ended. Like, I didn't think it still happened. So it was a real surprise to listen to this going, really? They still do those things?
Yeah. They're actually, I think they're scheduled all the way to 2025.
I'm really curious now what the 2021 Expo is going to do now that the 2020 Expo is going to be on top of it.
And there is. I think there is one. I think it's in Germany or something. I think it's already scheduled. I don't know. Dominoes. It gets backed up. Who knows? Don't remember, we still have an Olympics we're going to have to play at some point.
That's right.
Who knows what's going to happen? We'll figure it out.
Yeah. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the Iron Man. And Tony is still in the middle of his speech. So he's concluding his Tony talk here. And so he says, he says a lot of things, but like, I think the central thing that's very important that we need to focus on is it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not even about us. It's about legacy. It's about what we choose to leave behind for future generations. And by God, boys, I think we've got a theme.
Yeah.
I think that's the theme of the whole movie, and they just like put it right minute 9. Like they just laid it out in front of us. Very clever, Mr. Thoreau.
Now, don't you love too? Like as he's giving the speech, and the speech really has like 2 sections, right? The first half, which we did in the previous minute, is hubris. Nothing more than that.
Right.
And then there is someone in the audience you hear audibly say, "I love you, Tony." And it's so it's got to be a plant because his remarks are clearly prepared, and we'll talk why they are clearly prepared in his own mind. He immediately pivots to, "Oh, it's not about me. Thank you for saying you love me, but," and then he goes into this great line that you just said. That's theatrics. that is someone I would say that if this was a real event and you had planners for that event, that's someone who's supposed to say that at that point in his speech so that he can turn and now say, well, no, I mean, I just talked about myself for the last 2 minutes.
I think it was Pepper Potts. I think that was Pepper Potts.
Can you?
You think she's out there in the crowd?
Video game.
Yeah.
Okay,
that was a different Pepper.
From the video game.
But okay, so then how did she get down? Because now we know she's actually on a plane.
No, that's not canon. That's from the alternate reality version of this.
I like to think she was still in that plane, even though she wasn't.
We're not going to see her for a while, actually. So obviously, so the Stark Expo. Then Tony then pivots and then basically gives the stage over to his father, and so then we see Howard Stark pop up as I'm talking about. So Howard will be talking about more in minute 10 as he goes into his speech. But as we're talking about the World's Fair, like the Stark Expo is clearly based on the 1964 World's Fair. Rob talked a little about that up top too, and I did some research on that myself. The 64 World's Fair, which is held in this location, supposedly exactly the place where they are now, had over 140 pavilions, 110 restaurants, 80 nations had places there. 24 U.S. states had individual places there. 45 corporations had exhibits and attractions. The theme was peace through understanding, which I thought was interesting because it's peace also is on everyone's mind here too, but not necessarily through understanding in the Stark model, and they said that was symbolized by the Unisphere, which we talked about in the previous episode. One of the big things that happened at the 64 World's Fair is Walt Disney used it as a place to show off these new audio animatronics that he had created, and so there not only was Disney there just being Disney and having characters walking around and things too, but they actually had their own rides. So this is the first time people ever saw something called Pepsi-Cola presents Walt Disney's It's a Small World.
Yes.
Featuring that song written by the Sherman Brothers. Also, they had the, in General Electric, it's supposed to be called Progress Land, which had something called the Carousel of Progress, featuring a song called There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, also written by the Sherman Brothers. The Sherman Brothers are going to be important later on in this film, so remember that.
Very exciting.
Also, Ford had a exhibit called Ford's Magic Skyway. So you could actually get into a Ford vehicle, including a Mustang, and it would take you through a whole ride. So basically, this became what was World of Motion then in Epcot later on, but also some of the elements moved into Disneyland as well. And then there was also at the Illinois Pavilion, there was a little attraction called Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. So this is the first time anybody had seen anything like this. And so Walt Disney used it as a way of testing out his stuff before he would eventually take all of these things, move them over to Anaheim, and put together a little park you might have heard of.
It's fantastic.
Huge. 64 World's Fair is huge. And not just even because of everything you just mentioned, which is fantastic. It was really, it healed the nation, right? Because the United States is still recovering from the assassination of John F. Kennedy in November of 1963. This was a huge cultural event. There's a lot of articles you can read about, wow, this was the way in which the country was like, okay, peace. And that's even in the theme. Peace was so much about this because everything had been torn on that day in November. So
yeah.
Huge event.
So you talked about before about Men in Black. Men in Black obviously has a big thing this because the climax of that movie takes place on the same area. But also if you go watch the 2015 film Tomorrowland, they actually recreate the 64 World's Fair and show a bunch of stuff on there. So you actually can see the modern version, like them going back and showing kind of their version of what it was really like to be there and walking around in it. And also my favorite band, They Might Be Giants, actually shot 2 videos in this area too, Anna Ang and Don't Let's Start. So you can see a lot of the what's left of the exposition.
That's
from
early
the
They Might Be Giants.
Early They Might Be Giants, early 90s.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, 89, 90, somewhere in there.
And did you say that the Unisphere was built for the 64 World's Fair?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. It was built. Let's see. It was actually it was built for the 64 World's Fair. It was built on the foundation of the Perisphere, which is from the 1939 World's Fair.
Which I'm assuming must have also been here then, right? Or did they move that here?
I believe that was there as well.
Okay, gotcha.
and that is still standing.
Yeah, the
Really
and the
cool.
Unisphere. I don't know if we mentioned this. I think we mentioned in a previous minute.
Yep.
So it's a representation of the world, but there's also 3 loops that are going around it, and those represent the first 3 satellites. So at the dawn of the space age, all of this comes together. And
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a bunch of exhibits were focused on space because the space race mania was gripping the nation in the 60s. So there's tons of exhibits where you could like see different ships and satellites and things from the Apollo program.
Well, and you even get that with the Stark kind of the Expo logo, right? I mean, he's got those same essentially satellite lines like zipping around his logo. Like you see it with in the still images of it, where it's kind of a it almost looks like an atom sort of design. So, so cool. That's really cool. Way to tie it all together like that.
Yeah. So then Tony throws it to dear old dead dad.
so
Different dead dad. Can I just say?
Different. That's right.
Different dead. This is a new dad that we
That's
have.
right. We have
very briefly in this.
Yeah, because when you did the show, it was Gerard Sanders, but now suddenly Tony Stark is in his second incarnation, and he'll have a third incarnation before the MCU is done with him.
Well, he aged different. I mean, technology. He aged different. I was just saying, different things are
It's
happening.
true. Like maybe like when you photograph John Slattery, apparently he ends up looking like Gerard Sanders. So it's just one of those weird quirks of photography of the time.
Now, something I love about these remarks here is this. So he transitions, Tony's, as he's giving these remarks, he transitions to the first time since 74, best and brightest men and women, right? And introduces this. And I love this one line is because this is nuance in terms of public speaking is not only has he dealt with the hecklers well, but then he goes to this line where he says, therefore, what I'm saying, if I'm saying anything, is welcome back to the Stark Expo. And I love that because that's him acknowledging, I'm blabbering. Like,
that's very Tony Stark.
Oh my God, totally. I mean, right? Like, and kind of brilliant too. If you're a well polished public speaker, if you want to pat yourself on the back, right? You could do that. You could talk about, get into your great mode of this is what we're here for. But then you acknowledge that, I'm full of it. Right? I came out here to basically just say, hey, welcome to the Stark Expo. That's pretty awesome. And I mean, he delivers it perfectly. I totally love that. And then he does obviously makes the introduction to Howard Stark, making a special guest appearance from the great beyond, my father Howard. Here's the other thing I love. Then as he goes to step aside, on the screen behind him is this wonderful collage motion graphic of the current Stark Industries logo merging then into the original one, which we've seen, right, in different places. My heart leaps because when I see consistency like that in the graphic design, amen, man. I mean, I know we talked about the X, like obviously there's the moments where the things get messed up because the color of the X is obviously variance. But when you see that, I love the fact that those dots connect.
Yeah, it's fun to see them doing that, and obviously they're having a good time doing that. And we don't get a lot of that here in this particular minute. We just get a few little flashes of them and stuff before we are out. But it is fun to see that they are having a fun time, kind of tying all of this together now for all of us. And what I think is fun is that they're also, because as you kind of go from that and you see that screen behind him kind of with all the little video images are kind of flipping over and stuff, I'm assuming it's just a lot of other, they look like images from in the 74 World's Fair in story here that we have, but it's kind of fun to just kind of see a spattering of the different images that they've put together from that expo.
Yeah, there is one
as tiny as they are.
No, there's one you can clearly see as a World Expo 1964 logo with like a rainbow.
Yep.
And then you can see other images. You can see the Stark Expo logo of 74, which we'll see in the next minute more clearly. And then just like you said, like pictures of the pavilions and stuff from the mid 60s. So it's nice. Well done. It makes me smile.
It is cool.
Yeah, it's nice. And so obviously we'll talk more about Howard and his portrayer as we get into our next minute, but we will save some of that stuff because we got to keep you coming back for more. We'll save that conversation for minute 10. But in the meantime, if there's one thing that we know about Disney, it's that they love merchandise, and we're no different. If you like what we're doing here and you want to do something to support us and get something out of it, which is something I particularly enjoy, we have our own merch. So you can go to nextreel.com/merch and buy pillows, mugs, phone cases, masks. Yes. Put our faces on your face. You can get stuff from a lot of Marvel Movie Minutes Season 2 and soon the Marvel Movie, maybe even by the time you hear this, Marvel Movie Minutes Season 3 merchandise will be on there as well. So you get something out of it, and a little bit of that money comes back our way to help keep our shows a-rolling, because bandwidth ain't free, folks.
You know what, Kyle, you know what I can just say is if you're of a person who would like to buy one of those masks, and you should protect yourself and obviously protect those around you, you know what you could do is, to show our appreciation, take that mask, and before you put it on, turn it around, and we will give you a little kiss.
Oh, that's right.
And a little kiss. Just on your side.
What other show?
On your cheek, because we have, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's a friend kiss. What other show can make that kind of claim? Only here, Marvel Movie Minute. So thank you for joining us for minute 9. We'll come back here for minute 10, where we're going to get deep into the Disney of it all. We got a lot of really cool stuff coming up. So make sure you think. Thanks for listening. Enough said.
Bye.